There has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped at 10th and Ranch by Glider.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant. If we get my hat on straight here, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. Folks, welcome to the show. Thank you to all our new subscribers. Got a lot of new faces on this channel. So thrilled to have people joining us from all different parts of the country, different parts of the world. Welcome aboard to Police Off the Cuff, true crime, real crime from a police perspective. Folks, you know, there's a lot of things happening. We've been following, of course, the Murdaugh case and everything, but the Stephen Smith case, which somehow has been included in the whole Murdaugh scandal, we don't know, and I don't think anyone knows right now, maybe SLED knows, the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, whether this is at all connected to the whole Murdaugh family legacy here. And by that, I mean, SLED had made a statement upon the investigations in the deaths of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh that they found evidence that the Stephen Smith investigation was somehow connected to the Murdaughs and specifically Buster Murdaugh. But we really don't know that. What we do know is that it seemed at the very beginning that this investigation was not conducted correctly. Investigators disagreed with each other. That's never a good sign. When you have one police agency totally disagreeing with another police agency, the coroner coming to the scene and seeing one thing, and the pathologist doing the autopsy and seeing another, you got to get together somewhere, folks. You got to get together and compare notes and ask people, ask the experts, what do we have here? What does it look like? And it seems like this was erroneously classified very early on as a vehicle accident. And almost 8 years later, of course, this happened on July 8th, 2015. Almost 8 years later, we don't have the answers. And Sandy Smith, the mother of Stephen Smith, she's been unsatisfied with this case from the very beginning, and she wants answers. She recently put up a GoFundMe, and she was trying to raise $20,000 to do an exhumation of her son's body so the autopsy could be redone by a pathologist of their choice, being that they don't trust the results that were arrived at by the pathologist hired by the police. Well, not hired, that's who does the autopsies in this case. So she wants her son's body, which is not an easy thing to do. The facts and circumstances have to be presented to a judge. The judge has to agree that there's a need for it and sign an order allowing for the exhumation of the body. And then a pathologist of their choice will conduct the autopsy and not start brand new, because let's face it, the body has been probably embalmed. There was an autopsy done on it. So very difficult now, 7.5, 8 years later, to conduct an autopsy. Not impossible, but it can be done. In addition to it, Sandy Smith has hired two attorneys. Eric Bland, who was the attorney for Gloria Satterfield, who we all know was the housekeeper for the Murdaughs, who allegedly fell down a flight of stairs, causing her death. And there was a lawsuit, of course, where her estate was awarded $4 million, and Alec Murdaugh stole that money. So he's the same attorney that represented Gloria Satterfield, along with an attorney named Ronnie Richter. So this team of attorneys is now going to handle the case, the reinvestigation, if you will, in the death of Stephen Smith. So what they're going to need to do is hire fresh investigators, a new pathologist, highway experts, accident investigators and just investigators to knock on doors and to re-interview people that may have already been interviewed? Are these rumors that have been pointing to Buster Murdaugh just that rumors, and is there no truth whatsoever? We don't know that. We don't know that. Right now, it's at the rumor stage, it's at the finger pointing stage. But until you have fact, you can't even include that as circumstantial evidence unless you have someone that's going to say that, someone that's a swearable witness that can say that. At this point, they really don't have that. So they got to get this new pathologist to look at the injuries. And again, the injuries now 7.5 years old, 8 years old almost, to determine, could this have occurred from a motor vehicle accident, from the car striking Stephen Smith? How about where he was recovered in the road? In the very middle of the road, is that consistent with someone being struck by a car? I don't think so. I don't think so. If he was walking on either side, he would be in the grass, on the side of the road, not in the middle of the road. So these are some of the questions that need to be answered here. And there's many, many, many more. So they're going to have to re-interview people that have already been interviewed, and they're going to have to do a fresh investigation with fresh eyes, fresh ears, and a fresh point of view in this case. Joining me tonight to discuss this case is retired NYPD detective and straight out of Brooklyn, Phil Grimaldi. How you doing tonight, Phil?
I'm doing pretty good, Billy. And I just wanted to say thank you to all of the subscribers, the friends, the fans of Police Off the Cuff, and all of the new subscribers and fans and friends of Police Off the Cuff. We got a lot of new faces in the chat. We appreciate you guys. Without the new subs and all the rest of our fans, there would be no Police Off the Cuff. Thank you very much, guys.
That's for sure. And we have a second treat tonight. The man of reason, the professor, the retired NYPD sergeant, straight out of the Bronx, but in a mellow way. Retired NYPD sergeant Mike Geary. How you doing tonight, Mike?
Hey, Billy, thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it. Good to see you, Phil.
Same here, Mike.
Mike, is that introduction okay with you? I don't want to introduce you as too mellow. After all, you were a cop for 20 years.
I try to keep the Bronx accent to a minimum if I can, but I'll try to sound like a professor.
All right, that's great. Phil, I'm going to go to you first. Phil, what problems exist now with this case being 7.5 years old and getting a fresh eyes, fresh ears, and a fresh point of view in this investigation?
Well, Billy, there is going to definitely be some problems. The case is going into like 7, 8 years old now. But I think that there's enough that remains with regard to, Stephen's mother is having the body exhumed. They're going to do an independent autopsy on the remains that they've recovered. So they'll be able to get some information out of that with regard to the injuries. Even though the body has been in the ground for 8 years, there's going to be all kinds of introduction of, let's say, perhaps moisture, mold, insects, different things like that that may, may cause some changes to the actual, the corpse itself. But I think there's going to be enough there that they could look at the injuries to see if they believe it was consistent with a motor vehicle accident or some other type of injury. Again, there's going to also be photographs, sketches from the original investigation. There's going to be the original autopsy report. All of those things I would be going over with a fine-tooth comb. Number one, the original autopsy and anything related to it. Number two, the investigation, whatever paperwork there is on it. And number three, the new autopsy. Those things are going to be critical to determine if we believe that this is actually what they label it as, a motor vehicle accident, which I doubt very highly, based on a lot of the things that you pointed out, Billy, the body being found in the middle of the road. If they said that they believed it was caused by a semi-truck mirror striking Stephen as he was walking along the road. We know he ran out of gas. His car was found about 3 miles away. And obvious, physics here. If he's walking in one direction, the truck strikes him and he's on the side of the road, hits him, he would go into the shoulder, like you said, into the grassy area, the shoulder of the road. His body wouldn't wind up with, in the middle of the road. And again, the injuries would be there would be more scrapes and more injuries, other than the fact that just his left shoulder was dislocated. He had an injury to his hand, his left hand, and then he had the deep gash into the forehead that caused his actual death.
Mike, I want to ask you as an attorney now. These two attorneys, Eric Bland and Ronnie Richter, they now have to convince a judge that this exhumation is necessary. How difficult is that, Mike?
Well, in this case, because there's a lot of already predetermined dislike for some members of the Murdaugh family, you don't want that to be a part of any sort of judge's deliberation. You have to establish with go in there as an attorney with enough information other than some sort of playing on people's prejudice. You have to have some information that would lead a judge to order the exhumation of the body. It's not going to be, proof beyond a reasonable doubt or anything like that, but just consider something like a probable cause type of standard. If you have some witnesses' statements that may have been gathered in the past, maybe you can get some new witness statements. It's been a long time. Get a statement from one of the highway patrol officers, that investigated it. And you probably will be able to get a judge to order the exhumation, especially because SLED probably would want to be interested in that, and they are actually doing some other parts of the investigation already, since we've heard from after the shooting at the kennel, at the Moselle kennel. So they probably will get their court order, and hopefully there will be some fresh information and enough information, like Phil talked about, in the file. The file is probably pretty darn thick. They interviewed a whole number of people, and so that would be a good jumping off point. But I think overall, they will definitely be able to convince a judge that there is enough evidence to warrant the opening of the investigation.
This is Sandy Smith, and this was today. So we're going to play a little bit of this.
My son, and since I couldn't protect him, I'm going to fight for him.
Nearly 8 years after Stephen Smith was found dead in the middle of a Hampton County road, his mother, Sandy, wants an independent autopsy conducted to find out how her son died.
I want to thank everyone who's donated and supported us from the beginning. But I hope to find the real reason for Stephen's death.
Sandy Smith enlisting the help of a new legal team to ask a judge to exhume Stephen's body.
We're going to hire experts who are going to come into this case with a fresh set of eyes, with an open mind. This is not a Alex Murdaugh 2.0 or any Murdaugh 2.0. This is a Stephen Smith 2.0. It's all about Stephen.
I'm Anjanette Levy, and welcome to Law and Crime Sidebar Podcast. Stephen Smith was just 19 years old when he was found in the middle of Sandy Run Road, dead, in the early morning hours of July 8th, 2015. His yellow car apparently ran out of gas nearby. The pathologist who conducted the first autopsy on Stephen Smith concluded he died as the result of a hit and run. Stephen had trauma to his head and a dislocated shoulder. But some investigators didn't believe that because of a lack of vehicle debris in the road. The South Carolina Law Enforcement Division opened an investigation into Stephen's death following the murders of Paul and Maggie Murdaugh. A SLED spokesperson said at the time that information had come to light during that investigation that led them to open an investigation into Stephen's death. Last week, Sandy Smith started a GoFundMe page asking to raise $15,000 for an exhumation and independent autopsy. That page has now raised more than $65,000. Sandy.
I just want to mention something here. Any investigator that would go upon a scene like that and someone's laying in the middle of the road, of course that's suspicious in itself. And the person's dead with head trauma. And there's no signs of a motor vehicle accident. It's tremendously suspicious. And I don't know what type of care they took to do a complete, thorough, and if necessary, bring in the experts because we don't know what the hell happened here, and to come to the conclusions that they did. And especially it seems that the whole investigative team was disjointed. By team, I mean whoever was the first officers on the scene. They called in SLED, the pathologist, the coroner. They needed to get on the same page, and it doesn't seem like they were. Mike.
Yeah, Billy, there was a lot of contradictions. Starting at the very beginning, as you mentioned, the Highway Patrol, South Carolina Highway Patrol, begins the investigation. At one point, they believed that early on the gash to the head, the trauma to the head, they thought was somehow made by a bullet wound, and so they thought that it was a crime rather than a hit and run. Now you've seen NYPD Highway; those guys are fabulous. They can measure skid marks. They could figure out miles per hour. They can figure out directions of travel. They can do all kinds of amazing things. And it appears that they may have done some, but one of the problems is as they're working early on and they're taking statements and they're talking to Stephen Smith's mom, and they're getting information through back channels, mostly rumors about possibly members of the Murdaugh family involved, specifically Buster Murdaugh. And that seemed to kind of make the investigation kind of go awry. And then you have the two different coroners contradicting each other. So it seemed to have fallen off the tracks rather quickly after only a couple of days, maybe a week of investigation. And then it kind of died out. And, you and Phil would know much better than me. What do you do to get it back on track? It never seemed to get back on track for 6 years.
Well, Mike, one of the things that we mentioned all the time in homicide investigation is something called victimology. And that is the study of the victim. We want to know everything that was going on in Stephen's life at that time. We want to talk to all of his friends. We want to talk to his family. We want to talk to people he works with, other students. I believe he was studying to be an RN. We want to talk to everyone that knows him. Who was he hanging with? Did he have any fears? Did he talk about anyone that was bothering him? All of those things entail the victimology. And then we want to look at, when we gather all this information, what are we hearing over and over and over again? Are we hearing anything over and over and over again? So right now, of course, this is convenient to say, oh, yes, it's Buster Murdaugh. Mm-hmm. We can't go with that. That's good right. Investigation. Because first of all, we don't have access to the case folder. We don't know who they've interviewed. We don't know what people have said. But on the evidence itself, so right now, this has to be re-investigated. Phil.
Well, basically, Billy, you're right. You have to go where the evidence takes you. We don't know that Buster Murdaugh is responsible for this case, for this young man's death. We don't know if he's involved in it. However, during the initial interview, there was the name Murdaugh was brought up that they alleged 40 times. Now, one of the things that I would do is I would try to talk to every investigator that was present, because there was apparently some type, and I called it the last time we did a show about this, a pissing match between the investigators and the medical examiner's office, whether or not it was an accident or if it was some other type of injury. And so I think that, the feeling of those investigators, some of them may be retired, some of them still may be active. I would want to get interviews of them. It may be the same people that were working then that are working on the case now, and they may have their gut instincts or their feelings about what took place on what was it, July the 8th, 2015. So again, that's going to be very important too. And Billy, you listed some of the things that I listed. It's funny how we both have that investigative track in our minds. I want to talk to every one of not only Stephen's friends, I want to talk to Buster's friends to see what groups they were hanging in. They all went to the same school. They were classmates. So again, it might be the same circle of friends. Sooner or later, you shake that tree hard enough and you go hard, you're going to find something out. Now, if during this investigation that they're conducting now, they find any type of criminal activity with anybody that's within that circle, you now have leverage on them. Tell me what happened back in 2015 to Stephen Smith, and we can make this other thing go away. Those are the kind of things that are going through my mind if I'm investigating this case.
Well, one of the things I wanted to say, the attorneys make a point of saying we want fresh eyes, fresh ears, and a fresh outlook. That's true, but you want to find out and pick up the investigation where it was left off. Find out what the initial investigators did. Find out where you think they erred, and then pick it up from there. You can't disregard 7.5 years of investigation because you think they didn't do a good job and just start brand new. No, you got to pick it up where they left off. Mike.
Yeah, they have to pick it up where they left off, and they have to, do their re-interviews. But as you guys know, the evidence will take you where the truth lies. And I'm just hoping that Mrs. Smith, Stephen's mother, would be satisfied with if the investigation actually cleared Buster Murdaugh, and that maybe it was just rampant rumors because maybe Buster Murdaugh and his family had a lot of enemies, as well as friends in Hampton County. But I just want there to be a good investigation. Finish up, do whatever you can. If there's any kind of clothing, check it out for DNA. But then come to accept the fact that after you do that, that you've done all you can. And if it clears Buster Murdaugh, fine. If it doesn't, and you don't have any place to go with it, and you don't have any other further information that you gather, then we have to be at peace with that too.
Absolutely.
Sandy Smith has retained attorneys Eric Bland and Ronnie Richter to help her start the investigation into Stephen's death from square one.
We think a lot of the pre-death communications can be relevant. We also think that post-death communications on different people could yield some information. One of the things that we can do is
what he just said is super important, and he just said it in a little different manner than we said it before. He thinks some of the pre-death information is very important. That's part of the victimology, and he thinks some of the post-death information may be very important. 100%, he just said it in lawyerly terms. We said it in copisms, right?
Absolutely, Billy.
So let me get back to that.
Is start a civil suit to look at the cause of death, which would give us subpoena power as well as discovery rights under the South Carolina Rules of Civil Procedure.
And joining me to discuss the latest developments is Sandy Smith. She, of course, is the mother of Stephen Smith, and her new attorney, Ronnie Richter, who will now be representing Sandy Smith moving forward, along with his partner, Eric Bland. So Ronnie and Sandy, welcome to Sidebar. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Sandy, I wanted to start with you. I've talked to you on the phone, and I can't imagine, I can only imagine as a mom what this has been like over the last many years, almost 8 years now. Talk to me about your son. I want to hear from you about him.
He was a wonderful, amazing son. He was very intelligent, spontaneous. He was like my world. And yep, he loved books, he loved school, and he loved his family.
And at the time of his death, he was studying to be
That the hook that gets him there.
So you can't argue with this lady who lost her son, and she just wants justice, and she wants it, she wants a thorough investigation because she's not happy with the investigation that was conducted 7.5 years ago. I want to play a little more of this. We're going to show some of his clothing.
Is an independent autopsy from someone of national reputation who's done this before, who can tell us what really happened to Stephen.
Ronnie, do you expect to have access to evidence in this case? In particular, the clothing of Stephen that had some trace evidence on it, possibly some blue paint flecks. Do you expect to be able to get access to things like that so there can be some independent testing done?
Yeah, I'm not sure where that evidence currently resides. If it's still in the possession of SLED, then it's going to be discretionary with them whether they share that with us. And Eric had mentioned this at the press conference. We'd like a two-way street on this, even if it's just a one.
Mike, very, very important that the fact that they need to file a civil lawsuit so that they can get access to discovery material and they have subpoena power. You want to speak to that, Mike?
Yeah, until you file a lawsuit, if you're a family and you have an attorney that can speak with a prosecutor's office or a district attorney's office or an investigative office, if they do anything for you, it's as a favor, and you're not guaranteed anything. If you file a lawsuit, you now have subpoena power for documents and for witnesses, and you can bring them in and depose them, and you can get discovery material and look at to find out, almost like criminal discovery. This is civil discovery. You're going to find out what is in that case file, and so you can compel SLED under court order to actually turn over a copy of the entire case file and share all of the notes that they have originally from their investigation going back a couple of years. And even since they've already began to reinvestigate. So filing the lawsuit is one of those predicate legal obstacles that you got to overcome. And that will then allow you to do a lot more as an attorney for that family. So that makes absolute sense. That gives you the power to not only find out what has been done, but also you could have an investigator look like you and Phil and say what has been missing and what should be done. And then your own investigators can go out and do some more investigation. Very
Mike,
important.
just a quick 2 points. One, we know law enforcement doesn't like to give up things to attorneys.
Right.
So SLED may be the people that have possession of Stephen Smith's clothing. They're not going to want to give that up unless they are ordered to
That's
by
right.
a court order. So you're right. If an attorney just said, "Hey, I'd like to see those clothes and
Do me a
do
favor.
my own independent testing," then good luck, guy. Right.
Right. Exactly.
So the other thing is, Mike, just quickly describe to us in your professorial way what discovery is to some of our audience members that may not know what that is.
Discovery in a civil matter or criminal matter, it's very much the same. You're looking for, and for instance, SLED. It's a criminal investigation bureau. It's a state law enforcement division. They're like the state bureau of investigation, like a miniature, FBI for the state. They do all the criminal investigations throughout the state, and they put together case folders like you guys have done many, many times. And they have all those case folders with all the statements, all the pictures, all the autopsy results, everything that they would take to a district attorney's office and have looked at a case and maybe go on and indict someone. And so having that subpoena power to say, we're going to compel you, this is going to be friendly compulsion, but we're going to compel you to turn over everything to us. Because remember, Mrs. Smith and SLED are on the same team. They're on the same side. They have this person of interest, Stephen, who is the target of the victim here. And so what it does is everything that is in the case file will have to be copied and then shipped over to the attorney's office for Mr. Richter and for the Smith family to go through. So discovery is the legal process to get the entire case file on that particular case. Each and every bit of notes that were made, notebooks, you guys, detectives, you carry those notebooks. You've got the complaint reports, follow-up reports, all the informational reports, anything and everything they want to discover through this legal compulsion called a subpoena.
Mike, Abby in the chat says to file a lawsuit, there would need to be a defendant. Wonder who that will be. Is that true?
Well, at this point, they right now you don't have a definite defendant because they actually haven't begun a lawsuit, like a civil lawsuit.
Well, Mike, just to interrupt you, could the defendant be people, state of South Carolina?
You could. I know you can do this in New York, and I'm sure it's probably similar in South Carolina. You could ask a judge to issue you would bring a lawsuit. You bring a lawsuit, say, look, we're going to serve notice that we're going to initiate a lawsuit. We're in the very, very beginning stages. We want to do some discovery. You could, if you find out that there's nothing there, you may end up, filing a report with the state saying, we're not going to go through with it. We're going to withdraw our suit. But at this point, they're not going to be calling it Smith versus Murdaugh. Not at all at this point. But they're going to open up a lawsuit. They might name the SLED or the South Carolina the state of South Carolina itself, because SLED is an entity of South Carolina, and they could maybe claim on some levels if they want, perhaps negligence on the state investigators, and that would then give them immediately the power to subpoena all their documents. That sort of thing. In law, sometimes you actually will sue a party, bring a lawsuit against a party that you're not enemies with, but that you need to get information from. It's nothing personal, it's business. But you can't
What
just
are you,
can't
Michael
walk in there and say,
Corleone?
I was going to say the Godfather. That's from the
yeah,
Godfather.
yeah. You just can't walk in there and say, Judge, I need a subpoena. No, you actually have to initiate a lawsuit.
Yeah, but Mike, let me ask you. So, do you have to name a defendant or no? You're talking about maybe like a preliminary filing
Yeah,
for a lawsuit,
right. And say,
but
and
you're not naming a defendant.
well, you'd have to name a defendant. Would be probably the state of South Carolina or
Okay.
SLED, that sort of thing. And this way, and then you would get the subpoena power, because
So if you got the subpoena power
right.
and you're going to proceed with the lawsuit, can you change the defendant later on?
Oh yes, you could withdraw
Okay.
a defendant.
So you could pull discovery out based on suing the state, but now you've uncovered information. You know what?
Mhm.
We're going to go after Murdaugh or whoever.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
You can definitely do that, because you don't know. All you do is have to have a reasonable cause to believe that what you're alleging is, from an attorney's point of view, you just have to have good faith belief based on your professional ethics and your due diligence that the state of South Carolina did not properly investigate the case. It's very low bar. We're talking long time before you get into a courtroom and have a civil trial. But you do that, and the state of South Carolina and SLED, they're not going to be happy about it, but that's the only way you're going to be able to get subpoena power
Discovery.
as a civil attorney.
Mike, I just want to mention this because it's on everyone's mind in the chat. Sunset Gazing said, what was found at the Murdaugh property to stir this up? We don't know.
Intriguing.
And SLED
That's the
stirred
question of
this
the
up
day.
on June 7th, 2021, when they discovered the bodies of
Right.
Maggie and Paul Murdaugh. They made this statement. From that point on, they haven't told anyone what, in fact, they discovered. Phil, I want to segue to something else right now.
Sure.
We saw in that video that they recovered. They have Stephen's clothing. Now, we don't know if it was tested for DNA. And also, we don't know if it was tested for DNA, did it identify anyone? Was anyone else's DNA on his clothing? Because that could be important, because he could have been killed at one location and dumped in the middle of that highway there, that middle of that road. So that is very, very important. I mean, it would seem that that would be a no-brainer. They should have tested his clothing for DNA and all that stuff, but we don't know. So they want to retest it. It's also important, how was it stored as to preserve the DNA? And that's an important thing evidentiary wise. Phil.
Yes, exactly, Billy. Listen, in the beginning, it looked like it was going to be a homicide investigation. Perhaps there was some examination of the clothing. Whether or not they did DNA examination, we don't know. Is there a possibility that there is DNA still present that could be on his clothing? Yes, it's possible. Like you just cited, Billy, if the clothing was kept in a paper bag or some type of a controlled environment over the course of the 7-8 years now, there is a possibility that some type of DNA could be recovered. And real quickly, they talked about the blue paint chips. In the FBI lab in Quantico, Virginia, they have samples of every color that a car is painted that is driven around in the United States, and they could match it up exactly. So those paint chips could be very, very vital if they are paint chips from a vehicle, identifying what type of vehicle, where it was manufactured. So again, very, very important. I don't think they went that far on this investigation. Not the coroner, I believe it was the medical examiner, ruled it as a motor vehicle accident. So they kind of closed it back then. All of these things are going to be deeply, deeply looked into now.
Absolutely. Christina Patrizia, I love that name. Didn't they say that blue paint chips were found? Did they test the paint chips for manufacturer? Christina, that's what we were just talking about. And a lot of people have said in previous chats, oh, it could have been the paint from like an aluminum baseball bat, but that could be they could differentiate car paint from the paint on a baseball bat very easily. There are actual paint experts, as Phil was just alluding to. Folks, let me just do a quick little commercial. This is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you like real crime from a police perspective, you are in the right place. You can, if you're not subscribed to us, go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and ring that bell. If you want to help us out financially, we have a Patreon with 3 different levels, and we also have a YouTube channel memberships with 5 different levels. And you see the folks in our chat in the green font. They're part of our YouTube family, and we really appreciate them. We appreciate all you new subscribers. We've picked up a great deal of new subscribers from actually these Murdaugh, the case we've been covering here of the Murdaugh family. So maybe a lot of people from South Carolina. Today, Buster Murdaugh spoke out, and I'm going to play a little bit of this.
For nearly 8 years, Sandy Smith has been pushing for answers in the death of her son, Stephen. The 19-year-old was found dead in 2015 in what state investigators originally called a hit and run on a rural road in Hampton County, South Carolina.
As a mother, there's questions that I need to ask, and there's questions I need answers to.
Smith believes the initial findings may have been wrong and that someone murdered her son and staged it to look like an accident. It's a case that's never been solved, but as authorities looked into the murders of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh, they say information came to light, prompting them to reopen Smith's investigation. Smith's death has also received renewed attention from a recent Netflix docuseries about the Murdaugh murders and other cases with potential ties to the once prominent family. In multiple interviews, locals discussed rumors of an alleged relationship between Stephen and Buster Murdaugh.
There were so many rumors swirling around that Buster and Stephen were intimate together. Being gay in the Murdaugh family would have been looked down upon.
But Buster Murdaugh has never been charged with any crime in the case. And for the first time this morning, he's denying any involvement, telling NBC News exclusively in a statement, "I've tried my best to ignore the vicious rumors about my involvement in Stephen Smith's tragic death that continue to be published in the media as I grieve over the brutal murders of my mother and brother. I love them so much and miss them terribly." Buster Murdaugh, who took the stand in his father's trial, adding, "These baseless rumors of my involvement with Stephen and his death are false. I unequivocally deny any involvement in his death, and my heart goes out to the Smith family." Sandy Smith says she doesn't know who's responsible for her son's death.
But I want to know why you did it, and I want to find out who you are.
Now, thanks to thousands of dollars in online donations, she wants Stephen's body exhumed and an independent autopsy performed.
When it comes to an exhumation, there are several pitfalls that you have to look out for, namely preparation of the remains.
Despite the potential hurdles, Sandy Smith says she remains hopeful.
Peace, not closure. It'll never be closed because he's forever gone.
I mean, Katie, what are the next steps if they do move forward with a potential independent autopsy?
I don't think we need to hear what they have to say about this. Yeah, so, there you have it. There's Buster Murdaugh replying to what now we all know just as rumors, because we don't have access to what SLED has, which led them to make that statement at the site of the June 7th murder of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh. What do they know that we don't know? And this is what Buster Murdaugh is responding to, which is right now just rumors. And you can't imagine if it turns out to be really just rumors. Here's a kid that just lost his mother, his brother, and his father to life in prison. That's a lot to digest, huh?
Absolutely, Billy. There's something that SLED uncovered, because on June 22nd, 2021, which was about 2 weeks after the homicide took place, the double homicide of Maggie and Paul, they said they went public. We're opening a homicide investigation into the death of Stephen Smith as a result of information obtained during the double murder of Alex's wife and son, Paul and Maggie. So there's something. What it is, we don't know. Billy, I'm glad you pointed out that phone, because I think that's going to be another contention of good information for the investigators. If that phone is still around, they can get into that phone, perhaps come up with some text messages, maybe social media chatter. And again, I don't know if social media records will exist from 2015 that they could look into, but I'd want to know who he was talking with, what he was conversating about, where he was earlier before his car ran out of gas. All of those things very important to this investigation.
100%. I mean, we all know that now, and even 7.5, 8 years ago, the treasure trove of investigative information that was contained in someone's cell phone is perhaps no more important investigatory step to perform than the search and the cell site pinging on someone's cell phone that's involved or is the victim of a crime. Mike.
Yeah, we saw how important that was in the Kohlberger case so far. We're still waiting for that preliminary hearing, but the affidavit that was in support of the search warrants clearly needed the information from that cell phone. It pins him down to certain locations at certain times, doing certain things. Very powerful, evidence to base a probable cause search warrant. And hopefully there is that sort of evidence still in existence. I think Phil had mentioned that a couple weeks ago that the cell phone records might not be available after a certain, like maybe a year or something like that. They might be destroyed. And that's a problem in this case going back. You can't, just make up the past. But if we had that, that's great. But even if you don't have the cell phone location information, you might have cell phone texting information and emails that never die. They can always be recovered. And unfortunately, it gives you great avenues of further investigation, and that's maybe what they're talking about, chatter and things like that. And like Phil said, if that chatter opens up one avenue, and you have a person who needs some sort of legal help, the police can maybe forgive something in return for information. You'll never get a conviction against anyone based just on rumor, but you can use the rumor tremendously as an investigative tool to lead to some substantive evidence. So I think that's probably what they're really referring to.
Absolutely. Tom Cusinelli, retired NYPD captain. RICO, the law firm and government. Yeah, RICO, for you guys, it's not a guy from the Bronx. RICO is racketeering, influence, corrupt organizations. It's a statute that the federal government has used to go after organized crime. And you may argue that the Murdaugh law firm was organized crime. You could actually argue that, because it's been an ongoing, as they do more and more of this investigation on Alec Murdaugh, I cannot believe that they won't lay a glove on the law firm. I think they will.
That law firm, I'm telling you, Billy, they need to get in there, do a complete and total audit of everything that they did over the last 10, 15, 20 years. And I'm sure you're going to come up with some crooked stuff. And again, the way that the RICO law is written, you're right, Billy. If, he used people that he knew, he created an account. If he had help in any way, shape, or form with all the money that he embezzled through the law firm, stealing from clients, there could possibly be a RICO case if you really wanted to take a deep dive into the whole thing.
100%, I think there is. But, we got to concentrate on one thing at a time. And right now, it's this case, the Alec Murdaugh case. I think in August, he actually starts going on trial for is it the Glorious Sat? No, not the, no, it's the
all the
Mallory Beach. It's the Mallory Beach case, which is a civil case. He's actually going to go on trial for that. Or he's named in it because when he went to the hospital, the early morning hours of that boating accident, he went into each and every kid and was telling them that he represented them and not to talk. And he also tried to pin the accident that the person who was operating the boat was not his son Paul, but it was Connor Cook, who sustained a very deep laceration to his chin. And that was one of the pieces of evidence that showed he couldn't have been operating the boat because he hit his chin on a certain hard object that was certainly not the steering wheel or where he would have been had he been operating the boat. So he's being called into court for that. And even all the kids, the surviving kids that night, they were all like, that's not what happened. Paul was, and all the things that happened prior to the boating accident, specifically all the alcohol consumption, that sort of pointed directly into Paul Murdaugh's, that he was operating the boat, driving the boat, whatever, however you want to call it. And when his blood was taken at the hospital, it was a 0.24 blood alcohol, which to me, you're almost dead at that level of alcohol in your blood. I can't believe you could even walk with that level of alcohol.
And Billy, that was with a delay. They delayed it as long as they could. It was 0.24. Imagine had they taken it, sooner, maybe at the scene or immediately after. I'm sure that the father delayed it as long as he could for the son to sober up, and he still blew a 0.24 there.
We had mentioned, Phil, on another show, and this to me says a lot of things. That about a year after the boating accident, I don't have the exact date, that Paul Murdaugh was driving a pickup truck with his girlfriend in it and pulling a boat, and he flipped it over. And his girlfriend, her name was Morgan Dowdy, she called 911. And Paul Murdaugh right away called the Fix-It team. He called his dad. He called his grandfather, Randolph, and he called his mother, Maggie, of course, who was alive at the time. And they all came to the scene and made sure they got all the beer cans and all the guns out of the truck and actually chastised Miss Dowdy, the girlfriend, Morgan Dowdy, for calling 911. What'd you do that for? Can you imagine driving intoxicated after you had killed someone in a boating accident, being intoxicated? What does that tell you?
Tells me enabling, Bill. They've been enabling the kid his whole life. He was in that horrible boating accident. And a short time later, it's a year, I think, he, is drunk and flips over the car. Thank God nobody was seriously injured. But again, like you said, they called in the Fix-It team and the Murdaughs did their thing and they covered everything up.
There was actually some reports, I believe it was in one of the documentaries, that one of the Murdaughs responded to the scene of the accident with Stephen Smith and took the cell phone. I don't have independent confirmation on that. It was in one of the documentaries. Like, what was he doing going to the scene, first of all? Was he, that's the definition, Mike, of an ambulance chaser, right?
Right. How does he know where to go?
Yeah. Right. Going to the scene of that accident. And then if it's true that he took the cell phone, that's like a huge piece of evidence that law enforcement, of course, should have.
Right. You're obstructing governmental administration right then and there. You could be arrested just for that. You're not entitled to touch that phone, engage in any sort of interference with the police officers. At that point, they were looking at it perhaps, even if they were looking at it as a traffic accident. They had made a determination what it was. It was a homicide. Even if it was a traffic accident, it could be like a criminally negligent vehicular homicide. So anyone touching or interfering with that accident scene should have been arrested. Absolutely.
Well, you could say the same thing, Mike, to the boating accident scene, even though he was an attorney, but he had no right to go into the rooms, and you can't go shopping for customers at the scene of an accident. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like a defense attorney going into a precinct and saying, "I represent all of those guys in the cell."
Yeah.
Billy, he was going into that hospital. He was displaying that bogus shield that he had from the Solicitor General, and he was trying to coerce the story that was going to be told to the authorities. He was talking to all the kids. I represent you. You don't have to talk. And he was trying to point the finger at someone else other than his son. And he was doing a pretty good job of it. And I guess because of the nature of the town, that they had been in power for so many years, Solicitor General for almost 100 years, major law firm. They had a dynasty going on in that town, that some of these kids were maybe a little bit intimidated, but I think that they were reluctant to change their story. And about who was driving, what transpired before. We know there was the argument before the boating accident, and they came true and they told the truth, which was great. And I guess that's what led to the criminal charges against Paul and now the subsequent lawsuit.
Well, on the scene of the boating accident, the other Anthony Cook, the cousin of Connor Cook, who was the boyfriend of Mallory Beach, he was crying and screaming. He had dove into the water looking for her, and apparently she had a traumatic head injury, so that once she hit the water, she drowned because she couldn't save herself. But the police asked him, "Oh, who was driving the boat?" He goes, "It's Paul Murdaugh." He goes, "Good luck." In other words, like, good luck pinning anything on him. And the other thing is that I know we're segueing toward the boating accident, but in the boating accident, he, on the scene, the police really didn't do the right thing. Paul Murdaugh should have been arrested that night. He wasn't.
Absolutely.
They allowed him to go home. When you talk about influence, and Mike, talk about that. What do you think of that?
I mean, they're treating him with absolute kid gloves. Even when they finally did arrest him, they brought him in court. There was no mugshot taken with the graduated measurement on the wall or an orange jumpsuit. He was in his Izod Lacoste shirt. He got as good a treatment as they could give anybody. He was, and that's a real recognition that family was a organized crime family, the way they did things, and they conspired amongst the attorneys in the practice with bankers, with law enforcement to keep certain people out of trouble, and they did it for many years. That is a real recognition that kid was special, and he was going to get as much special treatment as they could possibly give him from law enforcement.
Well, Mike, what was amazing to me? It was amazing to me that at the scene, Alec Murdaugh spoke to Connor Cook's father and told him, "Don't worry, I'm going to represent your son. Everything's going to be okay." And he was trying to convince his father that Connor was operating the boat, not my son. So your son's in trouble, but he's not really in trouble because I'm going to represent him.
Right.
So,
don't worry about it.
What a schemer, premeditated scheming to try to get his son out of the mix,
He'd done that 100 times in his career, stealing from people, lying, filing false affidavits in court, falsifying documents. I mean, this is just, we think, and we can't believe that he would have the nerve to do that. But coming from his perspective, he'd gotten away with it for so long, and nothing was going to stop him from pinning the accident, the responsibility on his son. He would sacrifice anybody for his son. He didn't care. It's just amazing.
He didn't want his son to get caught in the trick bag, so he wanted to put somebody else in the trick bag.
That's right.
SLED, the investigative unit down in South Carolina, have actually reopened the investigation into a death because of what people are saying and what people are hearing, and the way the original investigation was done. We're talking about the tragic death of a young man named Stephen Smith. And, from the outside looking in, you look at some of the circumstances surrounding his death. I mean, it was a hit and run. That's what they're claiming, right? A hit and run, the original investigation. He's in the middle of some country road. And if you look at the road, like any of those roads down there are no street lights. Okay, so it's more dangerous, right? There aren't sidewalks, but wait a minute. Like, there's no one there. It's really quiet. So if you're walking down a street, you're going to hear a car coming up. And if you're walking down the street at night, you're going to see some lights. I mean, those two little facts make you think, how does someone walking down one of those country roads that I was driving around down there get struck? How do you get hit? How do you end up in the middle of the road? Like, why would you be in a position to get hit? How would you not have any sort of warning about it? And that's a big part of what makes the death of Stephen Smith suspicious. Also, the way the investigation seemed to go very quickly, and some of the facts associated with that investigation don't necessarily add up. Now, it may have been a hit and run. You know, what do they call it? A freak accident, right? And the person who did it, maybe they were under the influence, so they got out of there. I mean, it's possible. But it's also possible something else happened. So tonight on the show, going back to how I started.
Interesting. He's implying, and I'm going to use our New York word again, something fugazi happened here. Something very fugazi happened, in essence, that something was covered up by perhaps the responding law enforcement, or did the responding law enforcement just accidentally on purpose do a bad investigation or point the finger in the wrong direction? I mean, it really looks to me, and again, not being on the scene, not having access to the case folder, it seems like I don't understand how his body got in the middle of the road, laying there as if it was placed there in almost a perfect pose. And Mike, you mentioned earlier on, and a lot of people have made hay about this, his shoes were on. And if usually, I don't know what percentage of the time, but someone's hit by a car, sometimes they hit right out of their shoes.
Yeah, I've seen it happen myself. Back up in the 5-0, a gentleman was walking across the street. He was intoxicated late at night, like 3 o'clock in the morning. This was on a midnight to 8 shift, and he got hit by a car. And we found his body like 25 feet ahead of his shoes. So he was hit. So we knew exactly where he was walking when he got hit because his shoes were still there. They were like just like regular tennis shoes. They were on very loosely, but he actually was knocked out of his shoes. So the fact that Mr. Smith had on very loose, like sandal type shoes, and that they were still on his feet, to me, just from that, and I'm not a highway accident technician, I don't have any special training, but just from a law enforcement experience, that would be a red flag for me before anything else. Is you're not a traffic accident and you're just like lying there on the side of the road like you just fell down.
Mike, something else. How about the fact that all right, we're going to go along with the traffic accident theory. The tractor trailer hits him. He's thrust into the middle of the road. There's no abrasions on his body indicating that. And there would also be some of his skin or his flesh or his clothing on the roadway. If he was hit, that caused such a, it was described as like 8-10 inch gash into his forehead and his face, very, very deep, caused immediate death. You would think that was something that was very powerful. So again, his body would have been thrust. There would be abrasions. There would be, scrapes on his body. And we would also have those marks on the roadway. Not there. Right. Where was it? It was not there. Apparently, the only injuries were the gash to the head. Left shoulder was dislocated. Actually, the gash was on the right side. Left shoulder was dislocated, and left hand had abrasions. So again, it's not consistent with, and we're not experts in highway accident investigation, but it's not consistent with what we know of a highway accident. And we're pointing out the obvious. If he's walking along the road and he gets hit, his body should have been on the shoulder or in the grass, as Billy stated earlier, not in the middle of the road. So again, how do we explain that? That's where the suspiciousness comes in this case. There's a lot of things. There's no debris. If he's hit by the mirror, there'd be debris from the cracked glass of the mirror, perhaps parts of the mirror. Again, I've seen a lot of motor vehicle accidents. I've seen accidents where a person was hit by a car and the front of the car was like a V. It was indented. You would think they hit a tree or a pole, but it was a human being that they hit. It caused a lot of damage to the vehicle. There's no debris on the road. So again, the theory about it being a motor vehicle accident, extremely, almost 100% unlikely at this point in my mind.
Mike, I know that you got to leave. You told me that you can only be here for an hour. I want to thank you for coming on the show tonight. You're a fan favorite. You're a real calm influence on this show. You don't have as good a slang as me and Phil, but
No.
you're more educated than us. You use bigger words. So
he's educated.
He's educated. That's right.
Educated.
So, Mike, I want to thank you. Have a great night, and we'll see you on the next one. And Phil,
You got
I
it.
want to go
Take
right
care,
to this.
You guys.
Joe Murray, attorney at law. So have you found yourself in a jam? Are you in need of some legal counsel in the New York area? Well, let me tell you, Joe Murray's your man. He is not only an experienced trial attorney that Bill and I and everybody associated with police off the cuff can attest to. He's also a retired 15-year member of the NYPD. He literally knows both sides of defense. His telephone number is 646-838-1702, or you can reach Joe on his website at jmurray-law.com, or you can email Joe at jmurray-law.com. Joe is a big supporter of police off the cuff real crime stories, and we can attest to the fact that he is a terrific criminal defense attorney.
Absolutely. Good job, Phil. Oh, I got a room.
You got to knock Mike out.
Mike's still there, but he's not there.
We got a good shot of his books.
So, folks, one of the things, ban or kick him from the studio, it says. Kick guest out. Yeah, I just kicked them out. One of the things I think we're all thankful for is that there is going to be a fresh look at this case. So, you look at the mom, Sandy Smith, and, she's been waiting patiently, maybe not so patiently, but it looks like she's going to get her day in court. She's going to get people to reinvestigate this. And hopefully, as she said, she'll never get closure, but she wants to know what happened to her son. And that's one good thing about this new investigation. And we hope that she does, in fact, get disclosure.
Hopefully. And then we'll know a little bit more, because until the body is exhumed and we can have a real forensic autopsy done, I don't think we're going to get anywhere, because certainly Alex is not going to talk. I don't expect Randy to talk. And, Buster, I'm not sure is willing to talk. And if people aren't willing to talk, we're going to get nowhere. So I think it's going to have to be a forensic examination rather than a verbal disclosure.
Now, a lot of people, Eric, are taking the fact that Randy was there that night as kind of strange. And I'm trying to think of any circumstance of why he would be there. The only thing that came to my mind, Eric, is that he's a lawyer, personal injury lawyer. Maybe he gets tips from the local cops when there's a case that could perhaps, render some money to the most powerful personal injury firm in the Low Country. Is it possible that he's there that night because they've got connections with police, and police say, hey, let's call the Murdaughs, they probably have a good case here. Does that make any sense, or is that ridiculous?
Possible, not probable. He's not an ambulance chaser. That law firm is not an ambulance chasing law firm. You're not allowed to call somebody out of the clear blue and tell them you want to represent them.
I know you're not allowed to, but you're also not allowed to kill people also. So, there's big rules that you break and small ones, right?
Sure. There's rules of professional conduct, and I fully expected that law firm abides by the rules of professional conduct. Again, they're not a 1-800, chase your lawyer type of law firm. They're a very prestigious law firm. So I think there is a connection. And again, I think it's going to have to be a scientific forensic disclosure case as opposed to a verbal disclosure case.
Let's take a listen to, again, Stephen's mom here talking to Chanley about the Murdaughs. And she asked him about the Murdaughs. Let's listen.
Would it surprise you if had nothing to do with the Murdaughs?
I'd be happy. I don't like people getting a bad reputation because of rumors,
Sure.
I just want to comment on something that Eric Bland, the attorney, said. He's saying that the Murdaugh law firm are not ambulance chasers, but they're criminals. What do you mean? They're not ambulance chasers.
He's
worse
trying to
than
play
that.
nice. He's trying to play nice because he's in that area.
Are you kidding me?
And he don't want to throw stones.
Yeah, they only steal 8 or 10 million, but they don't chase, and law enforcement doesn't call them up and say, hey, we got a good case for you. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Eric Bland, I love you. You're a great attorney, but please How
Yeah.
can you even say that? That was so.
And-
That was the most. That was the
and
most
we know-
ridiculous statement I've ever heard.
Absolutely, Billy. And we know that he said they're not supposed to show up and say, I'm going to represent you. And we know that the Murdaughs had done that in the past. So again, he's trying to play nice. I get it. He's got to practice law in that area of the country. So he's just trying to, he don't want to, draw lines in the sand and make enemies, I guess, for his practice.
Crazy. Schmitty, Sergeant Bill, can you cover again why they pinpointed that he was only hit by the side view mirror? Schmitty, I think that's an absolute aberration. I think it's a mistake. They said they thought it was a gunshot wound. And then all of a sudden,
Initially they
that
thought
he
it was a
hit-
gunshot wound.
They're saying he's hit by a mirror. If he was hit by a mirror, it would break the mirror and there'd be glass all over the place. There was no evidence of that. So whoever invented that possibility, is just what I said. It was a hypothesis that seems far-fetched.
That was the forensic pathologist, Bill, if I'm not mistaken. And again, there was that little pissing match going on where the investigators were saying, no, this is no motor vehicle accident. We initially thought it was a gunshot wound, but now we see it's blunt force trauma. And the forensic pathologist is saying, no, it's consistent with being struck by a semi-truck's side view mirror. That's where it went from the investigative point. They closed it out as an accident. Again, I'm kind of throwing my hands on the air on that one. That very, very unlikely.
Yeah, but then Phil, then she said, tell me why it wasn't a hit and run. Like she was ready to go with whatever the investigators told her it was. So in my mind, the investigators never got together and discussed what they all had. And what they all thought.
Perhaps the political pressure in the town, they figured if that's what they're going to make it, they kind of backed off on it. I mean, that's the only thing I could think of. Listen, in my mind, when you're faced with all of the facts that we know, and we weren't present on the scene when it happened, we're only going by what's being reported in the media, and we don't have access to the case folder. But with all the things that we pointed out, something's rotten in Denmark. It's not a motor vehicle accident. Come on.
And the other thing is, if you run out of gas and you have your cell phone and your cell phone's charged, why wouldn't you call somebody? Why would you walk along a dark road, with all kinds of risks? It's dark. There's no lights around there. Why would you do that? Wouldn't you call somebody? Did he actually run out of gas?
We don't know that he didn't call somebody and get picked up and they were going to take him for gas. And unfortunately, he wound up dead. We don't know exactly what happened. Again, that cell phone was very, very, very important. I hope that it still exists. They can fire it up and perhaps maybe get the last calls he made or text messages, because again, you're making a great point, Billy. We don't know exactly what happened. And it's unlikely that, he would walk 3 miles. Like you said, why wouldn't he be calling somebody for help?
Absolutely.
From his house to where he was found is 3.5 miles. Then it looks like it's another, 3 miles or so, could be more depending on which way you walked to where his car was. So if you've got a cell phone in your pocket and you run out of gas on a country road, what are you going to do? Let's bring back Mike King, host of the Profiling Evil podcast, Eric Bland, Cup of Justice podcast. All right, Eric, you live in South Carolina. These country roads, some of them are very dark. They're not really well traveled. That's what really struck me about a hit and run. Seems kind of unusual. But even the distance and everything here in this map doesn't really add up to me.
No, a normal person isn't going to walk at night in the dark. They're going to use their cell phone. They're going to call their mother, their sister, or a friend to come pick them up or to bring gas. According to Sandy, where he was found, he would not have taken that route to get home. She said that he often would walk off the road in the woods because having, a gay lifestyle, he was very cautious in that area of the state on being alone. It's not a metropolitan area, and so he was a cautious young man due to his lifestyle that he led. So I don't think it adds up. I just don't. There's nothing in the road. I don't see a young man walking in the dark at that time of night on a country road when he has a cell phone. It makes no sense.
Mike King, he's got his cell phone, but he left his wallet with the car. That doesn't add up to me. And I would just think a simple, I mean, it can't be that difficult. A simple check the cell phone records. You know, did he call anyone? You know, if you break down, you're going to call someone, and who he called maybe picked him up. I don't know.
Yeah, there's only a number of cell towers out there, so cell coverage is limited in some places. So that becomes an interesting factor that I'd like to see, because the cell towers and the sectors at that time might be a little different than they are today. You and I actually talked about cell tower sectors a lot on the Murdaugh case, Vinny, and so we have to take that into account. It's possible that there may not be coverage at that point, but it doesn't explain leaving if he's going to walk to get fuel, to leave his wallet behind. If he's walking to go home, maybe so. But then I want to know how many houses, and I haven't done a count, maybe Eric has, but how many houses did he pass along that path that he could have stopped and made a phone call from? I'm not as much troubled by the fact that he didn't cut through the woods like maybe his mom said he would, or others, if in fact it is dark, just because of how difficult it might have been to see. So I don't know. There's a lot of questions that need to be answered.
Yeah.
So, Phil, JJ, thank you so much for the $4.99 super sticker. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. If you're not subscribed to us, go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, ring that bell. If you want to contribute to us financially, we have a Patreon with 3 different levels. We also have all of our YouTube channel members. You see them with the green font in the chat, and we really appreciate all of our subscribers. And thank you guys for building our channel to what it actually is. So, Phil, this case is it's going to start anew, and hopefully they'll get some good information on it. But it appears that the investigation, for whatever reason, left a lot to be desired, and we'll see if they can get to the bottom of this.
You know, Billy, it's a new day now. The dynasty has fallen. Alec Murdaugh is convicted of double murder. He's going away for the rest of his life. He's going to be going on trial for other crimes. So I think that shaking the tree, doing hard interviews, and possibly, I said it before, coming up with some type of criminal activity in that town, zeroing on that person, time to play, let's make a deal. Tell us what you know about Stephen Smith's case, and we'll make this other thing go away. That's some of the things that could be going on right now. Again, we pointed out a lot of different things tonight that we could do as investigators to try and come to the conclusion of what took place on the night that I believe it was July 8th, 2015, when Stephen Smith was found dead. So again, all of those things that we talked about, the original interviews, they talk about how the Murdaugh name was mentioned 40 times. I'd be going over those interviews, re-interviewing those people. What made you talk about the Murdaughs? What was the reason that you brought that name into this investigation? And, you know, you got to dig down hard. You got to dig down deep. And you got to get to the truth. You know, and I know interview and interrogation is it's a tough sport, but if you know how to do it and you're good at it, you'll get to the bottom. You'll get results.
Absolutely. Folks, Phil, that was your final thoughts, because we're at an hour and 12 minutes. I was about to say good night to everyone. Folks, we're going to stay with this case. You know, the mom, Sandy Smith, was able to raise over $60,000 in a GoFundMe. Hopefully the judge will write the warrant for the exhumation of the body, and this case will go forward the way we all hope that it will.
Billy, that was a little troubling about the fact that she had to raise the money to me. I felt like SLED should have taken care of that. A little bit troubling between the prosecutor's office and SLED. They should have been able to get that done. A troubling fact in my mind. Sorry about that, Bill. I didn't want to.
Yeah, no. I think you're right. Or if there was real question as to, this was a questionable investigation, which it obviously is, then the government should pay for it, not private citizens.
They came out publicly and said that we uncovered information from the double homicide, that we're now going to do an investigation into Stephen Smith's death. That to me is enough right there. Maybe politics played a little bit of a role in there in the whole decision that she had to go raise $68,000 on a GoFundMe page to get the exhumation and the the new autopsy done, the independent autopsy. So again, troubling in my mind.
Absolutely. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. Thank you so much for coming by and listening tonight. We really appreciate you. Have a great night and God bless.
Stay safe, everyone.
One episode